my very first time in Walmart in America. Why did I say mutt? Walmart. So I genuinely don't know what is here. I don't know if it's like home goods, if it's groceries, if, whoa. Okay, it's everything.
Imagine you have traveled 5,000 miles across an ocean. You have seen the skylines, the national parks, the monuments carved into mountainsides. And yet, the thing that stops you dead in your tracks, the thing that makes you pull out your phone and start recording, is a supermarket. Not a boutique, not a landmark, a Walmart. And for millions of Europeans who step through those automatic sliding doors for the first time, the experience is not shopping, is something closer to archaeology. They are digging through the layers of a culture they thought they understood from movies and television, only to discover that nothing, not a single shelf, not a single price tag, not a single gallon-sized jar of pickles, is what they expected.
Girl from Germany has a mental breakdown in a Walmart for the first time.
That word breakdown is not an exaggeration. It is the most precise description of what happens when someone raised on corner bakeries, weekly markets, and food that spoils in 3 days confronts the sheer, unapologetic abundance of an American hypermarket. The German girl in that clip stopped in the mustard aisle. Mustard. She had not made it past condiments, and she was already undone. To understand why, you have to understand what a European grocery trip looks like: a basket, not a cart. A few meals, not a month's supply. Everything fresh, everything measured in grams, everything fitting into a refrigerator the size of an American hotel minibar. Now multiply that by 1,000 aisles, add fluorescent lighting that makes noon look dim, and you begin to see why this is not a shopping trip. This is a cultural event.
This is my first time in Walmart. I'm on a field trip right now, you guys. It's like a museum, so let's check it out. It's huge in here, first of all. Look how big the onions are. This is the size of my hand. This is bioengineered. There is no way this is real.
She said museum, and she meant it literally. Not a shop, not a store, a museum. Because museums are where you go to encounter things so far outside your daily experience that you need a guide, a map, and several hours. She had no guide. She had a phone. And what she found in the next 60 minutes would challenge everything she believed about food, about shopping, and about the country that built this place. Here is what nobody tells you about Walmart if you have never been inside one. It is not the size of the building that shocks you first. It is the scope of the promise. A store that sells cereal and firearms, baby formula and fishing bait, wedding rings and motor oil. In Europe, these things live in separate worlds. The pharmacy is on one street, the butcher on another, the electronics shop 3 metro stops away. The idea that you could walk into a single building and leave with dinner, a new television, a hunting rifle, and a pair of children's pajamas is not convenient. To the European mind, it is disorienting. It violates a basic law of retail physics.
Let's see what this is all about then, shall we? It's huge. Now it's a car shop. Oh, we can go over there and get
Listen
cereal.
to what just happened in that clip. He entered expecting a grocery store. Within seconds, he found a car parts department adjacent to breakfast cereal. The British man had not even cleared the entrance vestibule before the cognitive dissonance set in. This is a pattern that repeats across every European visitor. The brain tries to categorize Walmart using familiar European frameworks, and the framework breaks immediately. There is no European equivalent. The closest comparison would be if a Tesco, a Halfords, a jewelry shop, and a gun range merged into a single building, and then doubled in size.
So, I know a lot of you guys will not understand this, but here's the thing. For me, one of the most touristical attractions in the United States is the Walmart. And every time I'm going somewhere and I'm seeing a Walmart, I will enter it.
Touristic attraction. He used those exact words. Not a shop, a destination. He plans his American road trips around Walmart locations the way other travelers plan around national parks. And when you watch what he finds inside, you begin to understand why. Because once you move past the entrance and into the aisles themselves, the real journey begins. The journey into a world where everything familiar has been amplified beyond recognition. The produce section. In Europe, the produce section is a quiet place. Wooden crates, seasonal vegetables, sizes dictated by nature, not by agricultural engineering. An onion in a European market fits comfortably in the palm of your hand. You buy 3 or 4. You use them within the week. Nobody thinks about onions as a statement. Then you walk into an American Walmart, and the onions are making statement. They are making several statements, all of them loud, none of them subtle. And our Italian visitor, a woman who comes from a country where food is essentially a religion, was not prepared for what she found.
It's huge in here, first of all. Look how big the onions are. This is the size of my hand. This is bioengineered. There is no way this is real. Who needs these many crackers? What is going on, America? Who? First of all, no. Look at the bread section.
Bioengineered. That was her instant conclusion. Not, these are well grown. Not, American soil is fertile. The size was so far outside her reference range that her brain defaulted to laboratory intervention. She was half joking, of course, but only half, because across the aisle, the story only escalates. The produce was just the warm-up. The real shock was waiting in the meat department.
But this kills me every time. This is pizza. Damn. 1.26 kilos. And of course the ground beef. This ground beef.
Bigger than my future. That is not hyperbole. That is a European man holding nearly 3 pounds of ground beef in a single package and genuinely struggling to process what family unit could possibly consume it before it's spoiled. In Europe, ground beef comes in 250-gram portions. 2 burgers worth. This was enough for a wedding reception, and it cost less than a sandwich in Milan. Now we arrive at the bread aisle. And if the produce section confused them, and the meat department amused them, the bread aisle offended them. You have to understand something about European bread culture to grasp why this moment matters. In France, bread is protected by law. A baguette must contain only flour, water, yeast, and salt. In Germany, there are over 3,000 recognized varieties of bread, and bakers complete 3-year apprenticeships. In Italy, bread is so central to daily life that the word companion literally means the person you break bread with. So when these visitors round the corner into an American bread aisle, floor-to-ceiling plastic bags, expiration dates weeks into the future, ingredient lists that read like laboratory manifests, the reaction is not curiosity. It is grief.
Oh, look at the bread section. The amount of packaged. So you do have a bunch of fresh bread. This is fresh, right? Baked in store daily, okay? How many? Zoom in on the amount of ingredients. This is not... Bread is 3 ingredients, you guys.
This is not bread. For words that carry centuries of culinary tradition behind them. She was holding a loaf that listed, depending on the variety, 40 to 50 ingredients. Emulsifiers, dough conditioners, preservatives, added gluten, enzymes, soybean oil. In her world, bread has 3 ingredients. When you have eaten 3-ingredient bread your entire life, a 40-ingredient loaf does not taste like an upgrade. It tastes like a chemistry experiment. And yet, the irony that most European visitors never articulate is this. American bread is engineered to be soft, sweet, and shelf-stable because that is what the American consumer demanded over decades of shifting food culture. The bread aisle is not a conspiracy. It is a mirror. And sometimes the reflection is uncomfortable for everyone involved. If the bread aisle was an offense, the dairy section was a crime scene. And our Italian visitor, the same woman who had already survived the bioengineered onions and the 40-ingredient bread, finally reached her breaking point in front of the cheese. Italy and cheese have a relationship that predates the Roman Empire. Parmigiano Reggiano is aged for a minimum of 12 months, sometimes 36, in controlled humidity, warehouses monitored by a consortium established in 1934. Mozzarella di bufala is made fresh daily and consumed within hours. Cheese, in the Italian understanding, is alive. It breathes. It ages with dignity. So when she turned into the Walmart cheese aisle and encountered cheese that comes in a shaker can, cheese that comes in a squeeze jar, cheese that is not legally permitted to call itself cheese, something inside her broke.
My cousin who lives in the US, I asked her one time, can you go to the grocery store and buy me some cheese? Bring me back some cheese. She brought me, you guys. As somebody who's from Switzerland and Italy, this is a hate crime.
She invoked Switzerland. That was not casual. Switzerland, alongside Italy and France, forms what Europeans half-jokingly call the cheese axis, nations where cheese is not a condiment but a cultural identity. To bring a Swiss or Italian person a canister of shelf-stable graded cheese product is the culinary equivalent of handing a sommelier a juice box. And yet, there is a reason American cheese culture evolved this way. Shelf stability, affordability, accessibility, these are not accidents. They are priorities. The two cultures are not asking the same question when they walk into a store. Europe asks, what is authentic? America asks, what is available?
And there we go with the milk. Don't get me wrong, I like milk, but 3.78 liters, 1 gallon, 1 holy gallon.
By this point, the European visitors have been inside Walmart for perhaps 30 minutes. They have navigated produce, meat, bread, and dairy. In a European supermarket, they would be heading to the checkout. But Walmart is not finished with them, because Walmart does not stop at groceries. The grocery section, the entire grocery section, vast as it is only half the store. On the other side of those aisle markers lies furniture, automotive supplies, electronics, clothing, jewelry, a pharmacy, a vision center, and, depending on the state, firearms. This is the moment when curiosity crosses over into something more destabilizing, because you begin to understand that Walmart is not a store. It is an argument about what a store can be.
Oh, we can go over there and get cereal. And you can't see it, but behind me, they're selling weapons. Oh, that's nice, darling. What are you doing? Getting a book? Here you go, I've got one for you.
I've also got one for you. That would be nice, wouldn't it?
And then next minute, we're at baby clothes. Oh, look.
Listen carefully to the sequence he just described. Cereal, weapons, books, baby clothes. He spoke those 4 words in a single sentence without a pause for breath, because in Walmart, they exist in the same sightline. In Europe, buying a firearm requires a license, a background check, a waiting period, and a specialized dealer, and you certainly cannot pick one up between the breakfast aisle and the children's section. The British man was not morally outraged, exactly. They were something stranger. They were disoriented. The store had broken his ability to predict what would appear next.
America, why oh why have you got so many cereal choices? It's unreal.
13 pack of donuts. Why was 5 not enough? Asda do 5. These men have 13.
Wow.
A baker's dozen, Americanized, commercialized, multiplied until the number itself stops meaning anything. And the cereal aisle, one entire wall of brightly colored boxes, each one promising a different combination of sugar, corn, and cartoon mascots, is perhaps the purest distillation of the Walmart thesis. More is always the answer, whether the question was asked or not. After an hour inside, the visitors begin their journey toward the checkout. The carts, enormous American carts with cup holders and child seats the size of small European strollers, are full of things they never intended to buy. And then the final surprise. The one thing Walmart cannot sell them because it cannot process the payment. The British couple, having navigated weapons and baby clothes and cereal and books, having filled their cart with American abundance, reached the register and discovered that the largest retailer on earth does not accept the payment method used by virtually every European adult under 40.
We've been sent back out to the car because Walmart don't accept Apple Pay. What? What in the freaking flipping bug? It's not 1980. Apparently they're like one of the only places that don't accept Apple Pay. Okay, that is the end of our Walmart experience, and to be fair,
Is not 1980. 5 words that capture the paradox of Walmart perfectly. A store so vast it sells everything: guns, groceries, engagement rings, fishing rods, insulin, tractor tires, but cannot process a tap of your phone. A store built on the principle of maximum convenience that somehow ends up being inconvenient in exactly the way you never saw coming. The British couple walked back to their car empty-handed, defeated not by choice paralysis or sticker shock, but by a payment terminal that predated the smartphone era. Walmart, in the end, had one thing it could not sell them: a way to pay for everything else. Here is what nobody tells you about culture shock. It is never really about the thing you think you are reacting to. The Italian woman staring at a can of Kraft Parmesan was not upset about cheese. She was confronting a fundamental difference in how two civilizations answer the same question: what is food for? In Europe, food is identity. It is regional. It is seasonal. It is the pride of a specific village, a specific valley, a specific grandmother's recipe passed down through 4 generations. In America, food is fuel. It is engineered for consistency, scaled for convenience, priced for accessibility. Neither approach is wrong, but they are answering different questions. Europe asks, where did this come from? America asks, How many people can this feed, and for how long? The European visitors who walk into Walmart with their phones recording are not simply making content. They are documenting a genuine collision of worlds, a moment where two sets of assumptions about food, about shopping, about daily life itself, slam into each other in aisle 7. And the result is not anger. Look at their faces again. It is wonder. Confused, overwhelmed, sometimes horrified wonder. Because they are not just seeing bigger portions or stranger products. They are seeing, for the first time, what happens when a society optimizes for abundance over all other values. And that is worth flying 5,000 miles to see. Take care of yourselves. Stay curious. Keep exploring the world with your eyes wide open, even if it is just a supermarket. I will see you in the next one.